There's a lot of very dedicated people.
I think you just hinted at one of the easiest analogies, who's at the table.
Like my dad said, log and always be worth more than you're being paid.
We're gonna have 30,000 more people here in the next 10, 12 years.
I am optimistic that we'll continue moving in the right direction.
And that takes finding people that wake up every day and they're thankful and they believe they can change the world.
This BendBeat discussion is brought to you by the Lad Group, Ben's leading real estate team. Today on BendBeat, I'm joined by two awesome people that are shaping the future and present of tourism in Bend. Thank you for joining me. So we've got Jeff Knapp, you're the CEO of Visit Bend, and Zavi Borja, you're the Director of Destination Stewardship over at Visit Bend.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us. I think we've got a lot of fun things to talk about. Visit Bend is very much at the center of a lot of what's happening here in Central Oregon, and we have a lot to talk about. So
thanks for having us.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah,
and I know you're
awesome.
both busy, a lot's happening.
That's good. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, there is.
A lot going on.
Well, so Visit Bend's at the center of that. Explain to me what Visit Bend is, and then I want to get to your story, but it's the official, what is it, the Destination Management Marketing Organization for the City of Bend?
Yeah, we are a destination management organization for the City of Bend. So
Okay.
we are a 501c6 nonprofit overseen by a board of directors.
Okay.
We are contracted with the city and we're funded through transient room tax. So
Yep.
people that are staying under 30 days in hotels, vacation rentals, RV parks,
Yep.
things within the city limits, those they pay a tax. About close to 70% of those resources go directly to the city to fund essential services like police, fire,
Yep.
roads. And then roughly just a little under 30% goes to fund our work, and our work is broken into two different categories, and
Yep.
we're held to a state statute by which we can operate within. So the definitions of how we can use those resources
Are pretty tight,
They're tight. They are tighter than a lot of people would like,
Yeah.
I think, given the complex nature of funding things in our state.
Yeah.
But essentially we have two roles. We have brand stewardship, which is our outward facing message to attract people from within or further than 50 miles to come and visit and spend overnight time and money in Bend.
Yep.
And then we have our destination stewardship work, which Zavi oversees,
Yep.
which is us putting resources and filling the gaps on things that that are improving quality of life for the community. So,
Yeah, and I'd like to pick apart about 4 things in there. I think it's really important work and all the different things you talked about. So Zavi, you're an interesting character. I've known you for a couple years now, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. I know you've been a lot involved in several different organizations here in Central Oregon, with a focus on cultural inclusion, responsible tourism, and really you're invested in the community. I'd love to hear kind of your vision for what you're doing and how your background affects that.
I wish I had like a clear vision. I think my biggest centering for any and all of this is just how to be a part of something bigger than myself. And so me, as someone who was born in Redmond, I grew up in Madras, and I've lived in Bend for the last 13 years now, just trying to find whatever that is and what that looks like. Naturally, growing up in this area, I have a love for the space and place, which is Central Oregon.
Yeah.
So for me, what comes natural is the nature. We have great access to nature, great access to the outdoors. And for me, just what role can I play and what entity can I work for or be a part of that is doing good work, and who do I feel is doing that?
Yeah.
And so part of that, I've worked through Kids Inc. I've worked for the Parks District. I had the opportunity to sit on the board for the Parks District.
Didn't you work with the state governor's office?
I did, yeah. So I think prior to that, I started a nonprofit. So started Vamonos Outside.
Yeah.
So trying to get more Latino and Spanish-speaking families into the outdoors, and through that, found myself being a service navigator. And at the time, the city of Bend had a new position open as a community relations manager.
Yeah.
And so in short, I applied, got that position, did that for 2 years. And the council goal within that was to increase access to city services by working with underrepresented groups. So again, did that for about 2 years.
Make city services more accessible, visual.
I mean, any and all of it, right?
Yeah.
So I think folks in the community can see it on the City of Bend's website, but it's like, what does the city do?
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest things or misconceptions that I saw out there was like, well, why doesn't the city do this? I was like, well, the city doesn't do that. Here's what the city does do.
Yep.
And so I felt like that was good impact. And then I had the opportunity to work for the governor's office. So covering Deschutes, Jefferson, Crook, Lake and Klamath counties, covering economic development and community.
Yeah.
And so that stretched a big scope. It was, pretty high level in terms of like executive branch of government. And in short, I felt like that was getting me too far removed from direct community.
Yeah.
I felt like we were doing pretty good work, but again, I was missing the on the ground grassroots work. And for me, that full circle of just like, okay, I was seeing tourism in kind of what we touched on earlier of destination marketing and destination stewardship.
Yep.
Visit Bend has been really on the precipice and like leading that work statewide and honestly nationally for what that looks like for a destination, and not necessarily shifting, but trying to balance what that looks like between tourism and visitation and taking care of the place that takes care of us. I saw that happening and wanted to be a part of it, and here I am.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah, Zavi's great. So Jeff, let's talk about you. You came from McMinnville.
Most recently, yes.
Most recently.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit about your background and what led that for you to be here in Bend and connected with and leading Visit Bend.
Yeah, so I moved to Oregon about 24 years ago. In my early 20s, made a list like many people did of things that you would need from a community, and it really was a community-based decision,
Yeah.
And so relocated, moved to Portland, lived in Portland for about 7 years worked in service, so in hospitality, running restaurants and events.
Yeah.
Through that time in Portland, moved after 7 years to the Valley and co-ran a winery.
Yeah.
So through that sort of moved to agricultural rural interface of a growing, booming wine industry.
Yeah, McMinnville has a lot of, it's obviously wine versus,
Right.
with outdoor
rec,
tourism and whatnot, it's a little different. Maybe it's wine versus beer, or however you want to do it. But culturally, there's some similarities there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so living there intentionally because of community and my interests, had the opportunity to stand up a destination management organization over in McMinnville. So there was not a Visit McMinnville at the time.
Yep.
So 2014, 2015, the city of McMinnville actually came and spoke with Bend and said, hey, how are you guys doing what you're doing?
Yep.
Took some of that infrastructure, the structure of how to do that, and I led an organization, Visit McMinnville, for about 8 years. Through that time, saw a lot of change, but more importantly, saw the importance of the tourism economy as it pertains to a community and city and engagement.
Yep.
And how I quickly learned about government and civics and how we can show up and make a difference. And so when the opportunity came up, and when Kevin was moving out of his role at Visit Bend, there was really one other place in the state that was doing the type of work that I feel I was excited about, and that is Visit Bend. And again, it's that model of, it's not just about heads and beds, it's not just about throttling as many visitors as possible, but it is about this balance. And I'm really excited to be able to be over here and get to work with people like Zavi, and it's really exciting.
Well, it's wonderful. It was very noticeable on kind of the trajectory of McMinnville as far as the visibility and the messaging that they put out there collectively as a community during your tenure. And it's wonderful to see that was birthed even from Visit Bend.
Really
I actually remember Dogwood, one of your predecessors here, telling me about he was going over to advise on McMinnville and collaborate on launching that.
Yeah.
And that's a small world.
Yeah, it's great. And even Nate, Nate, who was our coworker, was working with them at the time as well. And since I got here 20 some years ago, Central Oregon was where I was going to play when I had time off. So near and dear to my heart. Spent a lot of time over here over the last multiple decades, and watched closely for opportunities to come and be part of the community.
Yeah, well, wonderful. You're welcome, and obviously the town has welcomed you with open arms, and I think you're an integral part of kind of where we're going. So let's unpack that a little bit. We addressed this, or we alluded to it at the beginning on your funding and kind of your core mission, but let's pick it apart piece by piece. Mm-hmm. Your funding on Visit Bend comes from lodging tax dollars, correct?
Correct.
And that was passed 20 years, however long ago, as a lodging tax?
So there's been lodging tax for longer than 20 years ago.
Okay.
In 2003, state law changed to further define, kind of put some parameters around that.
And how it's spent.
On how it's spent and percentages of
Who gets what in terms of the split.
as far as the split. So,
Okay, so when $1 is taken in lodging tax, how is that spent locally or with Visit Bend?
So with there's on the state tax level too. So
Okay.
the state has a tax of 1.5%, and that goes to Fund Travel Oregon,
Okay.
which is a statewide effort.
Okay.
Locally, Visit Bend, if they leave $1 behind, let's say we have a 10.4% tax. So
Okay.
when you visit here
Within the city limits.
within the city limits, you pay that tax. Of those dollars, Nate's going to kick me for not knowing the exact percentage, but I think it's around 67% of that dollar, 67 cents, let's say, goes to the city of Bend. And the city of Bend, again, that goes to fund general fund. That's taxes that you don't have to pay or we don't have to pay as locals to fund things.
Yep.
And then, again, I should know the exact number, but I think
Well,
we're
I think
about
I-
29-30%
Something like
goes
that,
to our
yeah.
efforts.
And-
To your efforts, the mission of Visit Bend is to promote tourism.
So I think within the contract itself, it states, that we are to market, right? We are the marketing entity and agency that is contracted to the city. So our job is to market. Kind of the concept again is that what beds and heads,
Yep.
or heads and beds,
Yeah.
heads and beds. And I think Bend has done that. And I think also within that, they're not required to do this destination management piece in Visit Bend. And Visit Bend has, I think, strategically and methodically and thoughtfully moved towards that. And so out of the 70-30 split, so it's 65-35.
Okay.
That's what we get. And I'm not sure what that equates to $1-wise, but
Yep.
just big picture what that looks like. And then out of that 35%, that 100%, I have the opportunity to oversee a third of that budget that goes directly back into reinvestments into
And
the
that's
community.
newer.
That's
So-
correct. That's
okay.
correct. And then
Yeah.
We've been building to that over time.
Right,
So it's,
right.
Yeah.
So
it's-
you've been heading in that direction because
Yeah.
Right.
so the 65% helps sustain, because I guess I want to allude to some misconceptions that
Yeah.
some people might have of saying, why more tourism? It's
Right.
wearing out our roads, it's crowding our trailheads, and it's ruining our resources, and they don't give back because there's no sales tax and
Right,
things
right,
like that.
right.
And so this will fund millions of dollars a year for the city, for the trails, or for
general
for
services.
roads
Whatever
and
they-
all the general
Police,
services.
fire, general services, and the city has autonomy in deciding where and how that's spent.
And then out of your 35%, 2/3 of that approximately is intended to make sure that those heads still come to the beds, that
To
we
fuel
keep
that revenue
fuel that
for the
economy.
city.
The economic
And then
driver.
what's perhaps most interesting to me is that you've partitioned off approximately a third of your funding to do what? To create sustainable tourism, to mitigate the impacts. Let's
Yes.
unpack
Yes
that
and
a
yes.
little. Yeah. Okay.
You want to start? You
No,
wanna-
it's your.
Yeah.
you
So
take this.
yes, and so I think the way that we do that is by investing. So we have 4 different pots of funding. 2 of them are grant programs that I think folks are most familiar with, or maybe are not. But one of them is the Bend Sustainability Fund.
Then sustainability fund.
Correct,
Okay.
and that's open right now. It's live.
Yep.
And then we have the Bend Cultural Tourism Fund.
Okay, let's pick those apart.
Yeah, so-
The Bend Sustainability Fund. Give us a tangible visual on what those dollars do. Who
Yes.
does it affect?
Miller's Landing.
Okay.
Right, very new.
Down near the Whitewater Park.
Correct, down near the
Okay.
Whitewater Park. Accessible access to the river is created. Riparian habitat restoration for that area. We were able to reinvest $300,000 into that project over 2 years.
Okay.
And that's again out of visitor dollars that were
Yeah.
generated by visitors back to something that's a local asset, the river, and also the parks as well.
Okay.
As part of that. And that's a very tangible thing. And in line with that, we're able to invest in areas all over Bend. So we funded, places over off of Discovery West, Mount Bachelor, different trails, Big Sky Park. So like that dispersion piece, right? So we're trying to really reinvest into other areas to where maybe are loved to death, but also places that need a little love to grow and to be able to have beautiful places so other people can go and see those things as well.
Okay, so that's part of it. And I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
what were the other part of it was?
The Bend Cultural Tourism
Yes.
Fund? Yeah.
Bend Cultural Tourism Fund. Excuse
Yes.
me. Let's pick that apart.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
And that one's more traditional in the sense of marketing. That's our oldest grant program. So it's a little over 10 years. I think we just hit 10 years last year. So going on the 11th year.
Yeah.
And that one's specifically for marketing. And that's for marketing events. So we want, I think 90% of folks that state and come and visit to Bend state that they're here for the outdoor recreation opportunities, right? Makes sense. And as part of this, we want to diversify that as well. So we have that in complementary to other events in town. So we're able to fund things like Bend Film. We're able to fund things most recently, the Day of the Dead event in downtown Bend, Pride on the Mountain, Bendy Gras. So a host of different, again, cultural events. Another more recently one was Luscious Supper Club up on the mountain. And so again, a variety of different events that are allowing us to diversify our economy, our offerings as Bend as, yes, we are an outdoor town and we have cultural food vibrancy within it and being able to support those organizations through these marketing dollars for their event.
Awesome. Well, let's go back to you, Jeff. Let's talk about a big picture. What is the role of tourism in Central Oregon? And in Bend.
Yep.
And why is it essential to give it life some more support and promotion? Is it a self-sustaining entity? Is it a self-sustaining industry? Does it need promotion? And what is its role in the community?
Yeah, those are all really pertinent questions.
Yeah.
Let's just start historically. Bend and Central Oregon, Bend being the center of that, historically economy built up around mills and forestry and an extractive economy of sorts. So once that changed,
we ran out of
due
trees
to-
in what, 1950? You've talked about this in Bend 101, but we over-extracted.
Over-extracted and changed different federal and state regulations, et cetera. The community came together and said, well, we need to pivot. What do we have here as assets? And I think at that time it birthed tourism as a strategy.
Mount Bachelor.
Mount Bachelor.
Yep.
Timber to tourism, right?
Yep. Mount Bachelor's investment, Sun River, all of the things that have grown up that make this place appealing, attract so many people from around the world. That being said, tourism has been a lever to get us through very hard economic times like 2008, COVID. But what we have done as a community, very forward thinking, is that at one time we were a tourism dominant, that was the main industry. I think we're now third or fourth. And so what Bend and Central Oregon has really done well and continues to do well is to diversify this. So we're not just, an Aspen or a Vail or a Jackson Hole, which is a single economy based around this, which can be fairly extractive as well. So that balance is really important. So why is that important to Central Oregon? For many reasons. One, it is a tax revenue source. In Oregon, the challenges that we face as communities for funding basic services are tied to our tax structure. And we have a very progressive state with very progressive policies that have not really changed since the 70s. And as a state, we have made it difficult. We've made it unfriendly to business in a lot of ways. So we are 48th least friendly state right now as far as business goes. We're funded on income tax for state general fund. And we have gross receipt tax, all of these things. This sounds really boring. But we don't have a sales tax. We have property taxes, and we value land and restrictive with growth, which is good. At the same time, it makes things expensive. And our property taxes don't keep up to speed with the actual value. So funding police and all of these different things require resources. And tourism is one of the only growing resources in the state that is growing and is revenue. That being said, it's a drop in the bucket to solve these larger issues. So I think it's critical, not just for the dollars that it leaves behind for the city, but it's a talent attractor and generator and retention for business. So as we grow and make things attractive for businesses and stuff, it helps that we have multiple places to have sushi and that we can get 56 top-notch national shows in the summer at the Hayden Homes Amphitheater. That those things
aren't accidental.
They're not accidental, and so they are very strategic and intentional. And I think that's how we operate.
And I think something I want to add to that too is in relation to my last role. So again, working for the state, covering 5 different counties on economic development. What I have seen, and especially in rural Oregon, those smaller towns in Oregon, east of the Cascades or any side of the mountain in Oregon, what Jeff was saying, it's really hard to fund things. And I remember time and time again, truthfully, a lot of the smaller, counties and cities, they don't want to be Bend, but they want a little bit of the magic, right? They understand what that is. And I think Bend has done, honestly, an extremely good job statewide and even west of the Rockies on where and how we're positioning ourselves to, like what Jeff was mentioning, we're not solely reliant on tourism. We don't want to be, but it is a strong economic driver in overall economics, but also for helping funding city services like that general fund. So we don't have a lot of mechanisms to where to get that and where to do that. And time again, I saw that again statewide. And for me, frankly, I felt a little discouraged. Like, it's so challenging, it's super challenging how to align the legislature and executive branch and make those things talk and make it work. But here's something that is working. And for me, that was a great opportunity, in seeing Visit Bend doing a really good job of that in relation to Destination Stewardship, which I get to lead. And I feel really grateful for that. And being able to still work with those other jurisdictions to try to figure out that, yes, tourism is here and we want it to be here, and here's the value, and here's how we're reinvesting that back into the community, and how do we continue to grow these things.
Brian Ladd here. I appreciate you listening. This BendBeat podcast is proudly produced and brought to you by the Ladd Group at Cascade Hassan Sotheby's International Realty. We at the Ladd Group believe that real estate is more than just homes. It's about our community. We're deeply committed to making Bend a better place, and we dedicate ourselves to serving our home buyers and our home sellers at the absolute highest levels of our industry. You can learn more at bendpropertiesource.com, or you can always give us a call. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. But to start, as part of our Bend 101 series that we put together with the Chamber on helping people that are newer to our community get oriented on what Bend is, Damon Rumberg has always done a really good example, or he's the state economist for Business Oregon.
Lucky to have him live here.
Isn't he amazing? And he's a funny guy. But he's always done a really interesting breakdown on our economy. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I had, that a lot of people have, is that we're a tourism-driven economy. And what's been really interesting is that since the 1960s or 70s, tourism has remained about the same percentage of our economy for the last 70 years. What is it, about 10, 14% or something like that?
Of the total pie.
Of the total pie. And obviously it's growing as our population grows and whatnot, but it's remained the same percentage of our overall economy. So, for those that are out there that are just saying, tourism, Bend spends too much on tourism. When I look at it as a diversified economy, it's had about the same role in our economy for the last 70 years. But the spin-off of that, which both of you just alluded to, I think is one of the most important things, because at those events we say, hey, raise your hand if you started here as a tourist.
Right.
Every hand goes up. And so the human capital you're talking about that eventually move here, that bring businesses here in a tough business state, we have some of the most, we have, like, there was a couple years ago where Bend was creating more jobs, not on a per capita, more jobs than the whole Portland metro area combined.
Yes.
And so, like, we were creating, 10x the per capita jobs that some of these other economies were. And I know that it's easy to get frustrated with too much growth. There's but the fact that we have a diverse economy as that we do, so that we're not a Jackson Hole or an Aspen where it's waiters and billionaires, that the fact that we have a diverse economy where there's 15 different thriving industries, that starts with tourism.
And so we use data to help support our efforts to make sure that we're intentionally trying not to turn into a Jackson Hole. And we're doing a great job.
We're trying to keep a more diversified, open, accessible community.
And to that, as an example, with the exception of this last summer, 5 years prior, we have not marketed to visit here in summer. The community's feeling of like, whoa, we're cooked. Are we hitting our limit? Are we is there too much tourism? We said, okay, is there? And we pushed pause on marketing summer, focused, which we already focused the majority of our efforts to try to get folks here on the shoulder season in winter. But we engaged in studies with Eco Northwest and with Headwaters to answer some of these questions, like what are the threats? Are they here? How could we be operating? And then we saw things like the climate change, or the impacts of fire, I should say.
Yep.
And when we start to see those types of changes and the impacts that having smoke 30 days in July have ripple across the community, the study showed, no, you're not at capacity. It's just how you do it is important.
Crisis points.
There are certain periods of time that feel bigger.
Yep.
But we've had 30,000 households move here in the last 3 years. So
yep.
we are busier. Majority of the time it's us now.
Yeah, so let's talk about the biggest misconceptions and challenges that we might have, and let's start there. So when we talk about the use of resources, the use of trailheads, do you have any data on the use of tourists versus local citizens?
Yes.
On our resources.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. And we have the paper that we'd be happy to share online if people if they ever see it. But the predominant, I think it's over 60%.
It's like 60-40 split around there.
Yeah. Okay. 60-40.
Locals and visitors.
Okay.
With peak times, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July, there's certain peaks where, of course, certain assets, and traffic is definitely the addition of visitation can have a negative impact. We also see that when we're...
Is this for hotel? Is this for restaurants? Is this for trailheads? Is this for just in general?
Yeah, well, we've looked at all of those, the data around all those things. So we use geolocation type data to overlay things like the mountain, the water park, the amphitheater, and we can see the volume of use and where the people are coming from.
And I think the time of day, whether it's Memorial, whether it's October, and I think that's part of. And I'm not a marketer, but I think our marketing team does an excellent job of that dispersion of highlighting other areas like the Badlands, highlighting other places to where that dispersion of places where we're getting a lot of love in this area right now. How can we highlight some of these other areas during this time when we know this hot spot is right here? Mm-hmm. And I think woven within that are also like leave no trace principles, which goes back to this destination stewardship piece. So it's this fine balance also, like we're not telling people how to do things, right? I think at times that can maybe be like finger waggy, and we don't want to do that. So we're, again, thoughtful in the ways in which we're messaging those things on how, when you're visiting here, I think the concept of like visit like a local, right? So we're taking care of this place even as we're visiting, and also folks that live here.
Well, let's talk about that. Visit like a local. I was going to get to saying, hey, what is Visit Bend's responsibility in educating visitors, encouraging responsible recreation, protecting the outdoor spaces in this environment that we love? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spoke to it a little bit right there, right? And I think we definitely play a role. We have a responsibility in that. And as part of that, working with Leave No Trace, putting that in our visitor guide. So that's, spread out through all of our marketing efforts, again, through the visitor guide, through our marketing efforts through social media. Our visitor center does a really good job as well of like folks are asking, okay, I'm going to go to the lava lands here. Make sure you're talking about this. And they have all the information at the table as well. So I think we definitely play a strong role in that. And we do have a responsibility. I think one that we take very seriously. And as part of that, we have our strategic partnership. So another pot of funding that I get to oversee. And for us, that also, those funds go back to organizations that are leading that work as well. So it's not whatever role we can play through our marketing efforts in our human capacity and also the grant programs, but our strategic partnerships. So working with the Forest Service, working with Discovery Northwest, working with the Shoots Trails Coalition, these folks that are on the ground doing that work, being able to support them through that avenue and being able to show up also. So like we've supported the river cleanup fiscally and also shown up and like partaking in that. Right. So not just putting like our monetary value like out there, but physically showing up ourselves, our staff, doing that, again, kind of walking the walk to encourage, our staff, our team, and also visitors when they're coming here, that, it's just kind of what you do when you're in Bend.
Yeah, you get involved. So let's talk about challenges a little bit. So what would be, Jeff, maybe this for you, what are the biggest challenges currently facing Bend's tourism landscape? Is it available hotels? Is it housing? Is
Housing.
it workforce? Is it
Workforce.
Is it infrastructure?
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing right now?
Well, I think in Bend, some of the largest challenges are housing. Bend, That being said, Bend is doing better than most cities in keeping up with, bringing new housing online. That being said, in the greater context of not just Bend, again on a state level, it is we have a serious challenge with affordability, and so that's a large topic. How we show up at the table around that is with data again, and thinking of different ways that we may be able to generate revenue that could be applied to solutions around that. Our funds can't directly go to that, but there are ways in which we can advocate policy-wise. Workforce is always, we need a healthy workforce, and I think the workforce for us is really tied to housing. I think we have
because the service providers for tourism, they need housing.
Place to live.
Everyone does. I mean, if a teacher can't afford to live here, or if a barista can't afford to live here, it's challenging. That being said, again, it might not feel that way sometimes, but the city of Bend is really extremely active on rezoning and allowing denser building and being proactive with different overlays to help generate incentives and revenue to build the type of housing that we need.
That
to
missing
the best
middle
of the missing middle is really hard.
And the missing middle in that continuum, right, as well.
So that's where, it's not, the answer doesn't lie just in the city or just in Visit Bend or just the private sector. It really is, everyone needs to be coming together to try to figure out these things together. What are the incentives that we can, if we pull this lever, what happens over here? And so, I would say those are the largest challenges. The opportunities are diversification of Bend further, much like as we are with our economy, just as far as assets. Like more reasons for people to come and visit. Our data shows that only about 30% of people that visit in winter are here to visit Bachelor. So in my gut would be like, that should be a lot higher, but that tells me a couple things. It tells me, there's a lot more room for people to come and visit Bachelor. What are those barriers? Maybe roads, transportation, conditions, maybe more flights. And that tells me a lot of people are visiting Bend for other reasons than just Bachelor. So we have that increase in culture, increase in events, increase in population for visiting families, more restaurants, more retail. So we are managing growth as a community, and honestly, it's a lot to understand, and people have strong opinions about growth. But the people that are showing up to help and be in service are doing a damn good job, in my opinion.
Well, growth is the third rail. It's that it's hard to optimistically talk about it because it's such a lightning rod for anger and frustration. But I think I do beg those that have been in an economy or a community that lacks any growth to see the flip side of that, and the challenges when you can't meet your budgets and people don't have jobs and kids move away, and there's some challenges there, and obviously we need to walk that line, but adding a voice to it is important, and I even think what just you talked about for the last 5 minutes was very important, because people don't stay siloed in whatever industry they're in, whatever role at the city they're in. Like you just talked about 15 different things that are far beyond the scope of a traditional visitor, marketing organization. But yet, for good or for bad, when you move to Bend, you wear a jacket of cooperation, and it comes with the responsibility to be part of solutions. And I've always felt optimistic about that. But let's start with misconceptions, and then I'd love to get to forward-looking to opportunities like that. But we've addressed a little bit, but is there a misconception that locals and visitors often have about tourism in Bend?
Absolutely.
I mean,
You want to take any of them? I'm happy to go down a list.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is just that visitors don't pay their share, right? And again, I think that comes by way of the hotel lodging tax, right?
Yep.
Auxiliary taxes, so the TRT, TLT.
Yep.
So they're paying in that way. And then again, we are able to take that and sure, again, still market, but again, reinvest that back into the community. So the Bend Sustainability Fund is a great example of that, into physical assets that have a lifespan of 10 or plus years. They're shovel-ready projects. And to date, we have funded a little over $3 million into 31 different projects and 24 different organizations here locally that are stewarding and doing that work.
Yep.
And that is not insignificant. That's only been in the last 4 years. And so,
And those are BMX parks,
those
and
are
pickleball investments, and rivers.
Those are
and
things
trails.
that I feel like everyday locals are using in
Yep.
some way or another, and whether they realize that, you know, visitors had a role or tourists had a role in helping fund that,
Yep.
and that Visit Bend has taken it upon itself to then do. This was prior to me, right? I started in January, right? And so I feel honored to be able to continue that work and move it forward. But again, like that's something that, you know, that a lot of locals are interfacing with every day. The river trail, like we were able to reinvest our dollars into those projects, into those assets, into those things that we as community members love, but visitors also do.
Yeah.
I think that's like and that's also maybe a thing that I would ask community members and myself included is, you know, understanding that we live in a very beautiful place and it's hard not to have folks come and visit. And I think for some folks, if they're able to travel in other areas, we're also visitors to other communities as well. And so just understanding that piece. And again, I think we're doing a really strong job in that reinvestment piece.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I think fair share is the thing that comes up. Like they're to fair share. And it's also easy to be the other, right? We're blaming this. You don't. It's a tax on people that aren't coming here. I don't even know if people are aware of it, that those resources even exist, or that they're going to fund so many things that they're personally not having to, their taxes increase because of. Plus, also the benefit again of all of these things that people love about living here would not. We would not have as many coffee shops or restaurants or concerts or any of these things that help the, you know, quality of life would be unsustainable without the visitor economy that we have. So it is about balance, and you know, it's not sustainable. Well, I'm more worried about not managing it and letting it just roll out than being able to be conscious, to care, and to be at the table with data to help make decisions. And it's kind of coulds and shoulds come up a lot, you know, like.
And I think as I'm reflecting on kind of what I was saying, I'm just, and into what Jeff's saying as well, and we've already said this, but I think again, another misconception is that, again, these TRT, TLT dollars are like 70% of that, 65 is going to the city of Bend for essential services.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going into that bucket
Police
of funding.
service.
Correct. I mean, I don't know where and how. I mean, the city, you know, that
the services that we rely on, plowing the streets.
Correct.
Fixing
so that's going to come
potholes.
by way of a levy, by a bond, like all these different mechanisms. And here's a really cool tool that we have. And it's not insignificant that we're able to do that and help fund that.
And there are other communities in the state that's not the case. Like that, you know, for McMinnville, for instance, it's the opposite, right? So the city gets a smaller share for those things, and the Destination Management and Marketing Organization gets the larger. So as far as Bend's priorities and Bend's, as a community, I think that we're in a really strong position to keep things balanced and moving forward.
How do you define successful stewardship and healthy destination?
It's a great question. I think that's something, as I have sat in this role for 10 months now, is something I'm really curious to figure out as well. You know, I think that diversification of how we're spending the dollars is part of it, right? So the rivers and streams through, you know, a roof enhancement for Skyliner Lodge. So again, I think that's a really good stewardship effort of how we're doing that, because in the summertime it's used as a wedding venue, and during the school years, the High Desert Education Service District uses that facility as a place to take students.
Yeah, my daughter's done art classes in the woods up there.
Totally, and tourists funded the roof enhancements so that can keep going, right? So again, I think success can look a multitude of ways, and I think outside of like that, what you're saying, that traditional way, I think one of the, and I'm happy to share and talk about it, I think one of the more, I don't want to say controversial, but I think talked about, you know, grant that we were able to grant out through the Bend Sustainability Fund was the Pine Shed, so better now known as Dogwood. Right? Correct.
Where Spoken Moto Coffee Shop used to be.
Correct.
Right?
Well, it was. And again, we have no say in the business and what happens through like the business transition and whatever that looks like. So Visit Bend funded through sustainability was and is the shell, right? So sustaining and keeping the shell of the building.
For our listeners, this was a coffee shop in an old, not old, warehouse. I mean,
Yeah.
how would you describe that facility?
It's a pine shed, right?
Pine shed.
It's a
And
large,
it was picked up from the old Mills District and dropped in the Central Redevelopment District.
correct.
Why and how?
As an operator through the Bend Sustainability Fund,
Yeah.
and through what they called, it was the Catalyst grant recipient, right?
Yep.
So Catalyst named appropriately for that area, for the vision of Bend,
Yep.
right? For the vision of what that looks like for locals, what that looks like for the future of Bend,
Yep.
for visitors. So all these things are the catalyst for what the Bend Central District can and wants to be. And they're still figuring that piece out, and I think that's great. But again, serving as a catalyst, and it's now the Dogwood. So a really loved, I think for the past 3 years, and like from 2017 upwards, it won like best cocktail bar, in Bend through the Source. And so now having a much larger space, they're doing a ton of community events. They
In
have
an area that needed an injection of energy.
Revitalization, right? And for a lot of those future plans. And so I think that's a really good, unique example of, I think, that question of that stewarding, that diversification of areas. So you have the old mill, you have downtown, now you have the Central District, and being able to be a part of those conversations. And since then, the city of Bend has redeveloped, 2nd Street. They're redeveloping, they're redeveloping all these areas in that area to be able to continue to see that vibrancy take place. There's 7 different food cart lots now on that property. They're continuing to grow, and as part of that, again, the GM, Sean, has done a really great job of even some of the Bend Cultural Tourism Fund grants that we have funded for events have taken place at the Dogwood. And just up the street is, somewhere that's green. They do a lot of stuff with the Green Cabaret. So you have all this kind of like things that are starting to take place and happen as part of this investment and as part of that stewarding in a multitude of different ways.
And we get to that, that what does success look like coming from us is really not set by us. If we're successful, we are aligning what success looks up with the priorities and values of the city. The city's for the first time ever going through their own economic development strategic plan and really trying to further define those types of things. And we participate. We are the first organization in standing up the Sustainable Tourism Lab at OSU. So we engage in resident sentiment survey over a period of time to help direct our work and define what success looks like. So we are constantly addressing what success looks like and what does that impact and what could it be, what should it be. And again, we're taking the input
from the community.
We're not saying success is.
So you don't have a
X.
fixed, hardened vision for the
Every
future.
year we've got goals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it has to do with balance. We look at
Absolutely.
things, people, economy, people, place. It needs to be balanced and growing. If it's not, if we've got, we need to adjust and I think historically we have that evidence, right? Visit Bend was tasked with generating as much revenue as possible coming out of the recession of 2008. And we did that really well, so well that it was out of balance. And since then, we've adjusted our marketing efforts. We're not marketing in summer because the city's feeling this way. Let's do some studies and see what we could do. We opened up the grant funds to fill in gaps, and we'll just continue to do that. So help be a part of what success looks like collaboratively with all of the other people that are leading.
And I think as part of that is, Jeff has mentioned this before too, is our human capital. So I think this is a success to me. Being able to have the opportunity to chat with you, to chat with the listeners, to be able to get more information out there. We are more than willing and open to have conversations. Just recently I've been able to launch and do our second Bend Sustainability Fund tour. So taking some of our local elected officials, some of our board members, some city staff, some members from BDAB, so the Bend Economic Development Advisory Board members, as part, and see different projects that we have funded. So again, that awareness. And we're not only aware of, it's not like a self-serving thing of like, look what Visit Bend is doing. It's an opportunity for organizations to share what they are doing and leading with the leaders in our community as well. And again, for me, being able to spearhead that and move that forward and have opportunities like this just to share the work and help, have those conversations around misconceptions and address people's frustrations and see where they're at, and meet people where they're at. And so for me, that's also a success.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. As we continue to look forward, is there a finish line? Is there a defined vision of what your role is as a percentage of economy, or a cap of annual visits, or a percentage, a ratio of visits versus locals. Is there any sort of kind of defined future, end goal to Visit Bend, or is it a sustainable, vibrant piece of our economy that brings in new lifeblood? And I mean, we've addressed a lot of these things, but is there a finish line, or is it a redefining concept over time based on the goals of the city?
I mean, I look at it as a vital piece of our economy, regardless if Visit Bend exists or not.
Yep.
So I don't think there would be a finish line per se. I think it is important to be constantly showing up.
Yep.
And helping manage whatever the bend of the now is, and looking forward to the bend of the 20, 30 years from now to make sure that we're thinking about that, because we are so connected in so many ways to so many things that people, I think, just don't understand the ripples and connectivity of what the visitor economy is.
Yep.
That I think that there'll be plenty of opportunities to adjust our work to make it appropriate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have issues with work, this workforce need support.
Yeah, I think it's all the intersectionalities within those things, I think, is where we can adapt and grow within it. So our, like the goal, right, is to market, right? That's our contract. But again, as we've talked about earlier, that's why we've kind of diversified within that through Destination Stewardship. A lot of stuff that Jeff is kind of talking about right now as well, of that, the workforce, the housing, transportation. These are big community issues that we cannot solve. We cannot fund the mechanism in which we're funded by, but we definitely should be a part of these conversations. And so as city goals shift and change, as the state grows and shifts and changes, and what we're allowed to do here locally through those, not pressures, but through those mandates or laws or regulations, policies, we will adapt. And I think just being a part of what you said, that jacket of, you're a part of the community, you're here. And so, like, however we're showing up in that way, we can do that.
I think there's a really good project that's an example of something new and different that's going on right now, if it's okay to mention. So,
that would be wonderful.
Talking about growth, talking about all of these things, there's a lot of different interests. We meet with people daily who have ideas, aspirations, concerns. We have people that have dreams and say about expanding sports and infrastructure. There's, we really need to expand our hockey arena.
Yep.
We have this opportunity. We have the Center for the Arts in Central Oregon. We really feel like we have an opportunity. We need to be investing in this. We have, retailers and all different types of things trying to figure out how to bring things to life. While at the same time, we have a community and city that are trying to figure out how to just maintain.
Stop the madness.
We got to keep up with infrastructure, and we got to be able to support it. And we have fires, and we have houselessness issues, and all of these things. So again, the city has needs. They're growing. They're looking to redo their facilities to modernize to be able to support their own growth. And we have the Central District that's looking to expand development, et cetera. And all of these needs, we are proactively engaged with the city in economic development and an organization doing a feasibility study on a public assembly venue. So instead of saying we need a sports thing or we need a arts and culture thing, what could be an answer that might check a lot of these boxes? What could Bend support now and for the future that might check some of these boxes? And maybe it could also generate revenue for the city's general fund. Maybe it could also spur district growth. Maybe it could also connect with programs through higher ed, through education, for event management. So we're currently undergoing interviews on that so that we can bring data, again, not to solve it totally, but like, hey, maybe there's a way in which we can connect all of these ideas in some way that's a win-win-win that would allow us to do things in a covered space year-round, where we could do more. One of the things for us that is as even just to serve community, indoor spaces for gathering is we have a need just to serve basic community needs.
I mean, we've relied heavily on the private spaces that we have, whether it be Tether or the River House or whatnot. But there's pretty tight limitations about what you can do in those places.
And I mentioned this at our board meeting earlier this week, but anecdotally, a lot of the grant applicants and soon to be recipients for the Bend Cultural Tourism Fund.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that they state is that they need space.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of space in venues to be able to host or do their event.
Flexible, large format, indoor
there's a
spaces.
certain level that we're just not serving.
Yeah.
Maybe multiple levels. So, but is there a way that we, maybe through public-private partnerships or through all of these things that we could explore at this point in time, a solution or an opportunity, something to work towards. And so we're excited to have the results of those studies for January 1st, and just to be part of, again, that proactive data to help move community decisions forward and explore all of the options.
I'm really excited by the conversation that we've had today. I pulled up a quote by Anna Pollock. She's I believe she's out of the UK, but she is an advisor on what she calls regenerative tourism. And she had a quote that sustainable tourism is not just about minimizing negative impacts, it's about maximizing positive impacts. And I'm very encouraged by everything we've talked about today that Visit Bend is aligned with that. You know, regenerative tourism, making our community and location here, physical location here in Central Oregon, a better place.
Absolutely. And thanks for having us on to be able to talk about it. I mean, it is not a one-way conversation. Again, it's like the success relies on all of us being able to ask questions, have ideas, share concerns, get the data, show up.
Yep, and I perhaps focus the conversation a little bit too negatively in the sense that I always assume that people are negative with tourism, but there's a big percentage of the population, but hey, I'm trying to keep my restaurant alive.
Yeah,
hey,
totally,
I'm trying to make
for
a
sure.
living here.
And it's interesting also the amount of go ahead.
And you guys are doing a really good job at promoting tourism. Your core mission of trying to create tourism, we need to just go back to that and say, Bend's on the map. Bend is very much like when I go to real estate conferences across the nation, everyone knows Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we're a 100,000 person city in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. And I'm always the hip person to talk to. I've heard about that.
Yeah.
And so you guys are doing a good job.
It's been interesting. So I have a friend that lives in DC, and over the past couple of years, I've been able to visit him out there. And over the years, like in 2013, Bend, where is that in relation to Portland?
Yeah.
And then now it's like, oh, Bend, absolutely, right? And I think all these conversations, that regenerative tourism, all that what we're doing, all the reinvestments, showing up in the human capacity, understanding these larger impacts that we have as a state, as a community, being a part of those conversations, having a positive outlook on it, being engaged, asking questions, being able to dispel some misconceptions, being able to have conversations with folks. We're here for all of that. And again, just appreciate this opportunity.
Well, this is fun. I like where we're going. And most importantly, the fact that what we're doing here today, having the conversation, and I invite people that are newer to the community, whether it's tourism or it's healthcare or it's environment, I encourage people to get involved, learn, and find the person, because in Bend, this isn't the seven layers of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
We're one layer from anyone in Bend. If you ever have a concern in Bend, or you're one phone call away from sitting and talking to the person that is most directly involved in that.
Yeah.
And they're always willing to carve out time to have that conversation.
Which is the best part of the work that we do, honestly, in the chain, is that you can get stuff done at a city level, right?
We can affect change still.
You can affect change, and you showing up and your voice makes a difference. The further you get up the change, the harder it is. I don't want to discourage people from being engaged on state or federal level.
No, but that's why I came back, right? That's why I'm here.
We can do it, right? An idea can come from hey, we should do, who would be really good? Zavi. And we can deploy. So, and have those conversations and say, oh, we can stop that and maybe do this. And it's exciting.
This was presented and created by the LAD Group at Cascade Hassett Sotheby's International Realty. Whether you're buying, selling, or simply dreaming about your next chapter, we at the LAD Group are here to guide you. You can visit us anytime at bendpropertysource.com. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.